Hey everyone, so this is a last minute put together thing, so I'm sorry I couldn't be there today. My kids just can't get healthy for some reason this spring, so I am here, not live, from my house, at home, delivering to you some notes. Now on Friday, we labeled some routes with the introduction of westward expansion and conquest, aka the Age of Exploration. So you took these slides of notes, I believe, already, but if you didn't, you could pause me at this point and go back and record these notes for you. We watched a couple of videos about Holland, Netherlands, a tulip that talks but doesn't really because it was a joke. But here's where we start off today. These are the developments in Europe that allow for a more effective way to travel. These are tools, obviously, that go hand in hand with the fact that the scientific revolution was happening at the same time, that there was this renaissance, this questioning spirit present in many facets of life when they took classical Greco-Roman heritage and knowledge, and they were able to observe and experiment to find truth. And throughout all that, they were able to come up with some inventions that enabled travel and made it more, efficient and easy. So first we have the caravel, excuse me, which allowed it was a ship that made sailing into the wind possible. One particular ship beyond the caravel was the Vloot, which was a Dutch trading ship. This particular Dutch trading ship was designed for the sole purpose of transoceanic voyages for trade. It was made to have space for cargo, and it was an easy ship to navigate, so it didn't need a big crew. Unlike other ships in the past that needed larger crews because they had military capabilities on it as well, so it was a little more difficult to navigate with fewer people. This Dutch trading ship was quicker to actually make. It was cheaper to make, and again, it was an efficient way to sail. This particular Dutch trading ship was very similar to, can you guess it? The Dhow of the Indian Ocean Trading Network. That, again, wasn't a ship that had military capabilities on it. It was just solely used for trade. Now, other equipment that was made available on these ships was the astrolabe, the sextant, and the compass, which were all tools that helped sailors to navigate based on the stars and where the horizon was. Now, some ships, of course, did have military capabilities, but beyond the ships, just on land, the technology of the military was advancing with the help of interaction between people from East Asia all the way to Western Europe. And these inventions in the military world included guns, which had gunpowder, cannons, of course, and then some light armor. Of course, when you compare them to the medieval knight's armor, it's definitely lighter. So anyway, these developments in Europe furthered westward expansion, but also conquering. Remember, as they find the new world, or as they find locations that the Europeans feel that they can imperialize and control, they of course are going to use their military weapons against the indigenous peoples of those areas. Last week we spoke to you about the heavyweights, the middleweights, the lightweights of the Age of Exploration, and of course the two heavyweights were Portugal and Spain. So a lot of the explorers that I'm going to introduce to you were either Portuguese or were Spanish. Now, Portugal, again, is going to begin funding massive voyages due to the fact that if you look at where Portugal and Spain are, they are the farthest away from China and India, which was where the spices were. Again, spices were a product that motivated and inspired people to find an alternative route to get to the goods' origins because it was cheaper. So the Southwest Asian people who acted as the middlemen between China and India and Western Europe were increasing many of their prices. So spices were demanded, but they were expensive. So one of the first people that go out is Prince Henry the Navigator. This Portuguese man was actually, I think, if I'm remembering the story correct, he was like the third son in line for being a king, so he really wasn't destined to be king. And what happens is, in a family of men, what happens is the oldest obviously gets the inheritance of, the kingship, or, in the political world, in that regard, control over the government. And then the next person usually becomes a lord, or, some like a baron, someone who inherits large amounts of land, but is not the king, but is there in case the king does need to step down for whatever reason or dies. And then the next son after that can become a clergy member so that they can control the church, have power in the church, or become someone who gets to explore or study science and the world, like secular matters, and become a humanist in a way. So Prince Henry the Navigator is that fortunate enough to have that position, and so he goes on to become a cartographer to a certain extent, and this is somebody who creates maps based on their findings and their travels. Another Portuguese man was Vasco de Gama, super famous. He will be significant in that he begins to touch down into certain ports and parts of Africa, and eventually, because of this, Portugal will dominate trade along the Zenj coast between India and obviously the Zenj coast in the Indian Ocean trade network. He will be the first Western European to successfully navigate around the Cape of Good Hope and make his way to India and make it all the way back to Portugal, earning a 3,000% profit. That's right, folks. I said 3%, 3,000% profit off of what he trades with in India. So, although he is a European and plunders the Zenj coast, which is not something that's really a positive connotation, he does transform Western Europe into knowing that they can and do have access to India directly, and will be making many massive amounts of profits. And the commodities that they traded there were of the substance of spices like nutmeg and cinnamon, things like that. They can get textiles, which is a fancy word for cloth, and just like exotic goods that Western Europeans had never seen or had before. Now, if you know anything about the Cape of Good Hope, the fact that he was able to successfully navigate around the Cape of Good Hope is pretty admirable. I don't know if we can get this through screencast, but if you click this, okay, here we go. So he was able to come down around here, but if you look at all these different wind patterns coming around, right? So this was not a safe trip. It was very challenging, and there were many storms that rocked the Cape of Good Hope. So he was lucky to a certain extent. All right. Oh, that's Africa. That's not for you guys. Here it is. Here we go. So, Vasco de Gama, making his way to India. Okay. Also, again, this is just if we couldn't get that Google Earth to work. These are some of the different currents that happen. So again, you have to be pretty superior with your skills in navigation. How many times have I said navigation? Okay, so this is going to be the last slide because my kid needs me to lay with her, so I'm going to stop here. But again, all in all, if you look at Portugal's track record for the Age of Exploration, they were effective in creating posts around many of the substantial, profitable ports in Africa. And one other location that you might be familiar with that Portugal creates as a post will be Brazil. And that's why today, if you go to Brazil in South America, they do not speak Spanish there. They speak Portuguese, and that is because during the Age of Exploration, the Portuguese will indoctrinate, I don't know if that's the right word really for this, but will impress upon the native people of Brazil their Portuguese language. So, all these different ports, whether they were in Brazil or on the Zenj coast or on the west coast of Africa, they were all areas that they used for refueling stations, pit stops. But I also want you to take note that the Europeans aren't going into the depths of Africa yet. They're just going along the coasts. And we do, of course, know how big Africa is because we studied it in the earlier chapters. But Africa is a place that has many different climate zones, as well as an expansive piece of land. So I'm sorry, I didn't really expect to have to do this today. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll talk more about Vasco da Gama and Prince Henry the Navigator when my head is working correctly. Thank you for being so patient, and yeah. Good luck. If you want to get a head start on tomorrow's notes, that will also include, we're going to be going over into Spain and talking about Christopher Columbus. So here are the slides of notes for that. I just have to return to my daughter. So here's the one slide. You can pause it again because I'm going to put the next slide up now. Here's the next one and the final one. Okay? Alright. I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Good luck. If you want, you can do your homework or any other stuff you gotta do.